What's up guys, my name is Ace, and for those that don't know, yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of Warzone. It's been 1 full year since Warzone launched, and therefore I thought it would be a perfect time to share my wish list for year 2 of Warzone. What sorts of updates and quality of life features would I like to see in the near future for the game? Now don't get me wrong, I'm still enjoying Warzone a fair amount despite its obvious issues that it has. However, at the same time, I really do feel like things have been stale for a while now. It doesn't feel like the gameplay has significantly changed, or the map or anything. It seems like we just get like little tiny points of interest added, or we get a shift to the weapon meta every once in a while. But aside from that, it's still overall the same experience that we've had for many, many months. And I really feel like it's time for a really big update, something that really shakes things up and refreshes Warzone, and gives us sort of a renewed gameplay experience. So with my list here, I've got a bunch of things that are more like quality of life fixes outside of gameplay, and then I've also got a bunch of things that I would love to see done with the gameplay itself to shake things up a bit. Some of this I've already said on the channel in the past, so I am going to be repeating myself a bit, but it's because I really want to see these things. And also, of course, not everyone here is going to agree with absolutely everything on my list, and that's totally fine. I'm interested in hearing in the comment section below. If you disagree with anything on my list, just let me know why you disagree, and also let me know what other changes you would like to see in Warzone for year 2. So without further ado, let's hop into the gameplay related changes I'd like to see first. Now the first one is a big one. This one's been leaked and rumored for quite some time, and it still seems very likely that this is coming. This is a brand new Battle Royale map, and I'm talking a full-scale map, not like a mini version like Rebirth Island. Now this new map has already been leaked a long time ago, and it looks like it's going to be a combination of the Fireteam maps from Black Ops Cold War, and the rumors were initially stating that this would come around the 1-year anniversary of Warzone, which is right now, and we still don't have that map. However, it does look like they are building up to a potential map change with the zombies arriving and the nuke silos opening, for instance. So I think now the current expected timeline for that is the beginning of Season 3. That's going to be the big launch of a new map, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. But one of the big things I do want to see with the new map is the addition of water, so we can have swimming as well as boats and jet skis and stuff like that. I feel like that would just add an extra dynamic and an extra layer to the gameplay, which would be a welcome change in my opinion. After that, when talking about gameplay, there's one change I've been asking for, I believe since the beginning of Warzone, and it still hasn't happened yet, and I still just don't understand why it is the way it is right now. This is the way the armor mechanics work, where when you put an armor plate in, it will essentially just top up your current armor bar, rather than adding a full armor plate to your armor. So let's just say I have half of an armor plate, and I put an armor plate in. Instead of me now having 1.5 armor plates, which would make sense, it just tops me up and I now have 1 armor plate. I think it would just make so much more sense to give you that full armor plate rather than just topping up the current bar. And like I said, I just don't understand why they have it the way it is. It doesn't make any sort of logical sense, and it also just leads to a lot of inconsistencies, because putting an armor plate in doesn't always mean the same thing. Sometimes it'll effectively add 15 health to you, and other times it'll add 50 health to you. It should just be consistent. Every time you put an armor plate in, it adds 50 health until you max out, of course. Next up for gameplay related changes, something that got brought up on my stream a little while back that I actually think is a great idea is I would like to see the addition of a proper advanced UAV, or HARP, or Blackbird, Hater, whatever you want to call it. I would love to see that added as a viable option for, let's just say, $15,000. So make it very expensive, make it one of those really high value items. And with this, make it show literally every single player on the map. Regardless of the perk setup that they have, regardless of their distance to you, just show every single player on the map. It doesn't have to last for a super long time or anything. It could just be used to get a good indication of where the general groupings of enemies are. But I think it would just be awesome to have that thing that you could be working toward, trying to build that cash up for the more mid to late game situations. Now, I'm fully aware that you can buy 3 UAVs and call them in, and you sort of get an advanced UAV, but it is inconsistent as far as revealing ghost users. I believe if a ghost user is within a certain radius of you when you call it in, then it doesn't actually reveal them, whereas if they're outside that radius, it does reveal them, or something strange like that. And that just leads to inconsistent and confusing situations. So this is why I'd like to see a proper advanced UAV that shows literally everyone for a short period of time. Obviously, this would have to be tuned and balanced properly so it's not completely overpowered so you can just steamroll through everyone with it. But I do think it would be a good addition that would also improve the overall pacing of the game for those that want to play aggressively. Especially in solo modes, this would be a big game changer, because as of right now, I don't feel like there are enough tools to counteract people that are just sitting in corners or bushes with Ghost, and it would be nice to have a good, consistent tool at our disposal to deal with those people. And this leads me to the next topic as well. Something that I really feel could use some shaking up in Warzone is the perks. I feel like the perk meta settled in a long time ago, and nothing has really changed. Pretty much everybody is still going for Cold-Blooded or EOD in perk 1, Overkill and then Ghost for perk 2, or sometimes Ghost and no Overkill, but essentially Ghost is almost always the goal for people as a match goes on, and then tier 3 doesn't do nearly as much, but generally people will go for Amped. And I feel like this has just been settled in for so long, and it's gotten really stale. So I would love to see a bit of a rework to how the perks work, maybe add a few additional perks in there. One perk that I would love to see is the ability to plate up faster, the ability to put armor plates in faster. Doesn't have to be extremely fast or anything, but even just a relatively minor boost. If they were to add that onto one of the existing perks or create a new perk surrounding that, as well as maybe some other benefits, I think that would be awesome. Additionally, I would love to see less reliance on the Ghost perk. And this could be done in many ways. You could just bring in more perks into that same category that are much more competitive with Ghost, so people will actually have a solid reason for choosing something aside from Ghost and actually benefiting significantly from that. Or this could come down to nerfing the heartbeat sensor, for instance. This is another thing that I think would be great. When you compare the heartbeat sensor to other pieces of equipment in game, it's generally just so much more powerful than the other pieces of equipment because it has unlimited usage, whereas a stun grenade, you get to throw it once. So maybe they could add a cooldown on the heartbeat sensor, for instance. So you could hold it up for a total of 10 seconds for every 30 seconds of gameplay time, or just something along those lines. I'm just kind of throwing those numbers out as hypotheticals. It would have to be tuned and tweaked. But a nerf to the heartbeat sensor would effectively also reduce the reliance on the Ghost perk. Additionally, having that advanced UAV, like I mentioned earlier, that would also reduce the reliance on the Ghost perk, because if people are going to be getting that throughout a match anyway and finding out where you are, Ghost or not, then maybe that provides a bit more incentive to branch away from the Ghost perk. Essentially, by reducing the reliance on the Ghost perk while still keeping it as a viable option, this would just open up the perk meta a little bit more and provide more depth to the gameplay experience. Instead of just having the obvious choice of getting Ghost every single game, it would be nice to have some other alternatives without having to put yourself at a massive disadvantage against everybody that did select Ghost. And going off of this topic as well, I wanted to address suppressors. I made a video on this a little while back talking about how suppressors are basically needed if you're trying to maximize your effectiveness in Warzone, at least if you're playing against competent enemies. And this is yet another area where I feel like the depth of the gameplay experience could improve if suppressors weren't the obvious choice that you absolutely must use if you want to be competitive. And with this one, I think we've got a few options. I think the first thing is we should just eliminate any bullet velocity boost from all of the suppressors across the board. Make it so they're equal, not like we had where the Modern Warfare suppressors boosted your bullet velocity, whereas the Cold War ones were reducing your bullet velocity. Keep them consistent and either make it so they just don't boost it at all, or maybe a slight reduction to bullet velocity so there's a bit of a trade-off there. And this is the type of thing that would incentivize people to branch out a little bit away from suppressors. But on top of this, I'd also be really curious to see if they just adjusted the radius for when red dots appear when you fire an unsuppressed weapon, because currently it's 250 meters, which is a very decent distance. You can see a fight going on from your minimap, and you can pull up the full map and tag the exact location of enemy players that are 250 meters away from you. And to me, that's one of the biggest reasons that you should always be using a suppressor, because you're going to get third-partied and fourth-partied a lot because enemies can see you from so far away, and not only see the general area you're in, they can see exactly where you're standing. And honestly, I'd be really interested to see how it would play out if you made it so those red dots from unsuppressed guns, they would only show within a radius of about 50 meters, for instance, so it's just the enemies that are in your immediate vicinity that get that ping on their minimap to see exactly where you are. And then maybe make it so out to 250 meters, you get a ping on your compass, but not your minimap or your full map. So you could use that information along with the sound of the gunfire to get a good indication of the exact direction that an enemy player is in, but you won't be able to tell literally exactly where they're standing when they fired that shot. I think a change like this would provide a nice balance where there would still be great benefits for using a suppressor, especially in close quarter situations when you're fighting within the same point of interest with multiple enemies or multiple teams. However, if you didn't have a suppressor, then at least you don't have people from 250 meters away knowing exactly where you are, which puts you at a massive disadvantage. So I feel like this change I just presented would really mix up the attachment meta a lot more, and it would open up a lot more opportunities for different playstyles, and I also think it could improve the pacing of the gameplay too. So with that, I feel like that's a pretty good list of gameplay-related changes that I'd love to see going forward for Season 2. I think many of them are very viable, and they seem to make sense, at least in my head, but of course, if you disagree, please let me know why in that comment section down below. Now I just want to quickly also list off a bunch of quality of life changes I'd like to see. I'm not going to dive too deep into the explanation for these since I've already done that in the past with many of them, but I do feel like they're worth covering because I feel like they would make a very big difference in-game. The first one is huge for console players. This is an FOV slider. I would love to see an FOV slider on consoles, even if it was just for the next-gen consoles, so PS5 and Xbox Series X. If there's like potential performance issues on the old gen, then that would be awesome for them to be able to offer that. Or maybe even just a limited FOV slider for all the consoles. So instead of allowing us to go all the way up to 120 FOV, maybe cap it out at 100 FOV. And then also, if there are going to be performance issues like frame rate drops for instance, then just give us a message when we change our FOV that will warn us that we may lose performance by doing this. At least give the players their choice, even if it means they're going to lose out on some performance, because the difference between having a high FOV compared to a console FOV is absolutely night and day. Next up, a feature that I'm still very surprised we haven't seen yet in Warzone or even in Cold War's multiplayer is the ability to build Cold War blueprints. So you can get that perfect attachment combination that you're always going to want to use, you can save that, and that way anytime you want to bring that gun to a different class setup, you don't have to rebuild it from the ground up every time, you can just select it just like we can with the Modern Warfare guns. After that, I have a really big ask that doesn't seem likely because it would be a very expensive ask as well. This is just a general improvement to the server infrastructure or the netcode or whatever it is that's causing players to have significantly worse connections in Warzone compared to basically any other first-person shooter on the market. Just as a quick example for me, in most other games, I can typically get a ping value of around 50 to 60, whereas in Warzone, my average ping is around 120. That's often the ping I will get to European servers in other games, and yet that's the ping I'm getting in Warzone to North American servers. To top that off, I noticed that I get constant packet bursts and constant packet loss while playing Warzone, and it's just really frustrating how consistently bad the connection experience is. It's not like it's a rare situation where I get a bad game every now and then. It really feels like more often than not, I'm at a massive connection disadvantage, and that shouldn't be happening because I don't have that same problem with basically any other franchise out there. And I know I'm definitely not alone with this either. I see constant complaints about this where people are getting way worse connections compared to any other franchise out there. So whatever is causing this issue, I really feel like they need to invest resources to work on this issue in order to remain competitive with other franchises. But finally, one last really big quality of life improvement I would love to see in Warzone would be some sort of a firing range or just like a little area that you can load up where you can test out various weapons and attachments and change them in real time while you're in that environment, and just get a good feel over your loadouts without having to hop into a real game to test any sort of changes you're making to your setups. Now, I might be a little bit biased here since that's kind of what I do for a living, is constantly testing out all of the attachments and all the little minuscule effects that they have, which is extremely tedious to do in public matches when other players are out there trying to kill you while you're just trying to do testing. But even for the average player out there, I think this would be a very welcome addition to the game. And with that, I think that's a pretty good place to leave this video. I feel like if many of these changes were implemented into the game, it would definitely freshen up Warzone a bunch and make for a much better user experience. Of course, those are just my thoughts, and that's my wish list. I'd love to know in the comment section below, what's your wish list for Year 2 of Warzone? What sort of changes or additions would you like to see? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.